Discover how the complexity of God, interwoven in every aspect of creation, reflects more than just a distant celestial figure. He is actively engaged in our daily reality. There are 7 unknown aspects about the meaning of the name Yahweh. This Hebrew title for God is generally interpreted as, "I am who I am." In an extraordinary manner, God manifested himself to Moses in the desert, in a burning bush that did not consume itself. It was at that moment that he entrusted Moses with a vital mission, to communicate with the Pharaoh to liberate the Israelites who were enslaved in Egypt. Confronted with the weight of this mission, Moses challenged God with a crucial question, seeking an answer to underpin his decision to accept or reject this challenge. He asked, "If they ask me who sent me, what should I say?" In response, God instructed Moses, saying, "Tell them that I am has sent me to you." He also instructed, "Inform the Israelites that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This name will be remembered for all generations as my eternal memorial." Initially, Moses believed his authority derived from his title as a prince of Egypt, but after 4 decades as a shepherd, his perception of self-sufficiency shifted, and it was then that God spoke to him. I refer to "I am who I am," an expression that may seem enigmatic, but reveals an unparalleled depth about God. He is incomparable. There is no entity comparable to God. If we place God on one side of the equation, on the other side, we can only place him again. The best way we find to describe God is to say that God is love, as in 1 John 4:8 and 4:16. However, this is not entirely equivalent because we cannot assert that love by itself defines God. God personifies love, but he transcends this description. The name "I am who I am" is intrinsically linked to Yahweh. This short expression clearly alludes to the name Yahweh, which seems to be a synthesis of the complete phrase in a single word. Yahweh was not an unknown name. It is mentioned over 160 times just in the book of Genesis. Even the name of Moses' mother has a meaning linked to Yahweh, indicating Yahweh is my glory. Both Moses and the Israelites already knew the name Yahweh. God did not introduce a new name to Moses, but called him to recall the faith of his ancestors without introducing novelties. In English-speaking regions, Yahweh was sometimes pronounced as Jehovah. Over time, devout Jews avoided pronouncing the name of God as a sign of reverence, omitting its vowels and replacing them with those of Adonai, which led to the creation of the name Jehovah. However, in biblical times, the name was known and pronounced as Yahweh, or as revealed to us, "I am who sent me to you." God revealed to Moses his name as "I am," indicating his eternal existence. He has always been and will always be, completely transcending time. The name "I am" encapsulates God's absolute independence. He depends on nothing and no one to exist, as described in Isaiah 40:28. 29 and John 5:26. Theologians often describe this attribute as aseti, meaning that God is entirely self-sufficient and life resides in himself. Furthermore, this name highlights God's eternal and unchanging nature. In divine vocabulary, there are no concepts of past or future. Any temporal reference is merely an adaptation to our limited understanding. The name "I am" also reveals that God is the complete answer to our needs, especially in times of lack. When we find ourselves in darkness, Jesus asserts, "I am the light." When we feel hungry, he declares, "I am the bread of life." And when we feel unprotected, he assures us, "I am the good shepherd." Thus, the name of God not only announces his presence but also serves as an invitation, encouraging everyone to experience his goodness directly. "Taste and see that the Lord is good" becomes a call to personally experience God's sufficiency and support in every aspect of our lives. Yahweh is described as the one whose beginning is unknown. No one has been able to answer the intriguing question, Who created God? To this day, there are no records of the origin of God. Our only account is the creation of the universe and everything in it. In the beginning, Elohim, meaning God, created the heavens and the earth out of nothing. The earth was formless and empty, a true void covered by darkness and a primordial ocean. The Spirit of God moved over the surface of the waters, as described in Genesis 1:1-2. This account reveals to us 12 fascinating aspects about creation, as narrated in Genesis 1. This chapter not only explains how the world was formed, but also highlights who was the architect behind it all. The word God appears 35 times in just 31 verses of Genesis 1, emphasizing that all creation revolves around him. In this context, we learn 12 important lessons about God in Genesis 1. It is crucial to note that, although Genesis recounts various beginnings, including the creation of man and other creatures, God has no beginning in this record. He was already present at the beginning, as stated by the Bible, and existed even before the creation of the universe. Philosophical questions about the origins of God transcend our understanding, because before the existence of our universe, there had to be something or someone eternal. And the Bible makes it clear that this entity is God. Scriptures truly reveal to us in various passages that God is uncreated and eternal. This means that he has always existed and will always exist, without beginning or end. Several biblical passages reflect on God's perennial nature. For example, Psalm 92 proclaims, "Before the mountains were formed, or the earth and the world were created, from eternity to eternity, you are God." Likewise, 1 Timothy 1:17 exalts, "To the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen." Habakkuk 1:12 reinforces this view, declaring, "O Lord, you are eternal. My God, my Holy One, we will not die. O Lord, you have appointed them to execute judgment. O Rock, you have ordained them to punish." In the book of Revelation 1:8, God himself presents himself saying, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end," expressing that he is eternal and all-powerful. Isaiah 57:15 also describes, "For thus says the one who is high and lifted up, who inhabits eternity." These biblical assertions lead to philosophical reflection on the origin of God. If we were to consider that God had a creator, the question would arise, who created that creator? And so on, resulting in an infinite regression of creators. This suggests the need to accept the existence of an uncreated creator, because the alternative would lead to an endless cycle of unanswered questions. The question of the origin of God often arises, but Judeo-Christian faith maintains that God is the starting point of everything, without a previous creator. Accepting the existence of an uncreated God avoids the paradox of an endless chain of creations and allows the understanding that the universe had an absolute beginning. S.M. Lockridge reflected on the transcendental nature of God, explaining that the reason God arose from nothing is that there was no other place from which he could come. The term "I am who I am" is significant because God has no beginning and will never end. He cannot cease to exist because he never began to exist. He is immortal and indestructible, resisting all attempts to be denied or forgotten. God is the origin of all creation, the Alpha and the Omega, and even time and seasons are under his control. Isaiah 46:9-10 emphasizes this truth, reminding us to consider God's past acts, acknowledging that he is unique, without equal. He declares the end from the beginning, proclaiming events yet to come, ensuring that his purposes will be fulfilled according to his will. In the 3rd chapter of Isaiah, we learn that God is absolute, and all forces must submit to him. When events occur as a result of our choices or the laws of nature he established, it is because God determined it so. Even when adversities arise in our lives, it is God who allows such trials as the just judge. This principle was vividly illustrated in the case of Nebuchadnezzar. His pride led him to believe that he controlled all aspects of his kingdom, but he was humbled and lived like an animal for several years. When he regained sanity and realized that his kingdom had functioned perfectly in his absence, Nebuchadnezzar finally bowed in reverence to the one whose absence would end life as we know it, acknowledging God's supreme sovereignty over all aspects of existence. The story of Nebuchadnezzar is described in detail in Daniel 4:29-37, illustrating God's sovereignty and vigilance, who never sleeps, as expressed in Lamentations 3:37-39. This passage questions us: who can speak and have it happen if the Lord has not decreed it? Reflecting that both adversity and prosperity emanate from the Most High. In this context, it is asked why anyone should complain in the face of their own guilt and sin, emphasizing the importance of humility and willingness to let God guide us. Jesus often identified himself with the divine title, I Am, a clear allusion to the voice Moses heard in the burning bush, as recorded in the book of Exodus. This title not only underlines Jesus' divinity, but also his eternal nature, proving that he is unchanging, the same yesterday, today, and forever. In John 8:24, Jesus warns that without recognizing his true identity, people will die in their sins. He emphasizes this reality again in John 8:28, explaining that his words and actions are directed by the Father. The statement in John 8:58, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am," further emphasizes his pre-existence and divine identity. Jesus reiterates this point in John 13:19 and 18, 4:6, where, even facing betrayal and capture, he presents himself to the guards saying, I am. His declaration is so powerful that those who came to arrest him retreat and fall to the ground, subdued by the manifestation of his divinity. This episode not only strengthens the understanding of his identity, but also foreshadows the magnitude of his mission and sacrifice. God is fundamentally self-sufficient and independent, needing nothing and no one, although we all need him. The name Yahweh, which means I am who I am, emphasizes that he is complete in himself. As Acts 17:24-26 reveals to us, God, the creator of the world and everything in it, does not dwell in temples made by human hands, nor is sustained by them, for he himself is the source of life, breath, and everything else for all beings. God has established each nation and determined the periods and boundaries of their lands. Everything in our lives depends on the continuous existence granted by God. We, who are not divine, depend entirely on him for our survival and for the functioning of everything in the universe. As stated in John 1:3-4, through him, all things were made, and without him, nothing that was made would exist. In God was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The presumption of human self-sufficiency is sometimes ironic. We act as if we are completely independent, but in moments of quietness, we seek God for help. Every bone, nerve, blood vessel, or cell in our bodies was created with precision and divine intelligence. This is why God disapproves of pride, and expressions of self-sufficiency should not be part of a believer's vocabulary. No one is truly independent, for even the oxygen we breathe is provided by God's grace. The expression, I am who I am, underscores the incomparable greatness of God. In Matthew 5:34-35, Jesus warns us not to swear by heaven, for it is the throne of God, nor by earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, and not by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. This guidance emphasizes that nothing is worthy of comparison with God, and that nothing should stand in the way of his sovereignty. Throughout history, many have tried to equate themselves with God, but all are mortal and destined to perish. When we examine the book of Exodus, we realize that Pharaoh's actions represented an attempt to equate himself with God. I am who I am reminds us that God is constant, steadfast, and reliable. Yahweh is the same yesterday, today, and forever. As Hebrews 13:8 confirms concerning Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is eternally unchanging and does not adapt or change to satisfy our whims or the passing trends that often divert people from God's ways. God, as the I am who I am, remains constant and unchanging. Knowing His ways, we are strengthened against deceptions and are not easily swayed. In the Old Testament, the name Yahweh is often translated as Lord in uppercase letters, reflecting the respect and reverence that the name demands, as there is no direct translation that fully captures its essence and meaning. God, in His essence, is entirely self-sufficient and eternal. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, existing as the only completely independent being. Even the most powerful people are subject to the frailties of health and life circumstances, but only God is truly autonomous and self-sufficient. The name Yahweh, used in the Bible, highlights God's relational nature, particularly when discussing His personal connection with His people. In Psalm 19, we see a clear distinction between the names used for God. Initially, the author uses the name Elohim when speaking about God's relationship with the material world. From verse 7 onwards, the focus shifts to Yahweh, reflecting on His intimate relationship with those who are in covenant with Him and have a personal knowledge of Him. Psalm 19:7 states, "The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple." It is significant that God chooses to reveal Himself as Yahweh, indicating that His primary goal in establishing a connection with us is to make us aware of His personal and intimate nature. He desires to establish a relationship with His followers, as evidenced by His coming to earth as a human and enduring the punishment we deserved. Despite His self-sufficiency, God seeks to be with us, demonstrating Himself as a compassionate and loving God. For those already comfortable with the idea of God's existence, this notion of a personal and relational God is a fundamental part of their belief system. However, for those still exploring or questioning the existence of God, understanding this relational facet can offer a new perspective and depth to the idea of divinity, showing that not only does God exist, but He actively desires a relationship with each of us. It is truly inspiring to reflect on God's presence among us, a reality often forgotten amidst the daily routine. Yahweh not only exists in an abstract sense, He is actively engaged in our world and in our lives, moved by love. God is not obligated to stay close to us or to weave a narrative of love with humanity, but He chooses to do so. As Jesus explained in Luke 17:20-21, the kingdom of God does not come with visible observations or spectacles, for it is among us, manifested by His presence. Heraclitus, the philosopher, stated that the only constant is change, reflecting the transient nature of the world we live in, where everything seems to be in constant flux. In contrast, Yahweh is immutable. Since the beginning of time, He has been the standard of perfection and holiness. This presents us with a clear choice to conform to Him or not. There is no third option that allows us to shape God according to our convenience. He is not influenced by passing philosophies or modern theologies, although we may be tempted by these novelties. Therefore, it is crucial to maintain a firm understanding of Yahweh's unchanging truth. In a world where popular theologies often reduce God to a servant who exists to satisfy our immediate desires, we must recall the transcendence and holiness of God, as highlighted in Psalm 50:21. God communicates with us deeply but remains distinct. His methods and nature are beyond our complete comprehension. Yahweh is a name used exclusively with those who are in covenant with Him, symbolizing a deep and committed relationship. This name is not just a label, it is a promise of fidelity and closeness, reflecting a God who not only created the universe, but also chooses to personally engage with those who follow Him. Recognizing the holiness of Yahweh is essential to understanding the depth and seriousness of our relationship with Him. A relationship that requires reverence, love, and genuine commitment. God revealed Himself as Yahweh by making a covenant with Abraham, promising His unbreakable faithfulness. This presentation was not just a promise, it was a declaration of His constant and reliable nature. Later, when reaffirming Himself as Yahweh to Moses, He reinforced that He is immutable and worthy of trust to fulfill His promises. God's love for us is ceaseless and eternal. He is faithful and always fulfills His word. Our trust in God will never be exaggerated, for He will always be present to honor His commitments. Yahweh, shrouded in mystery, invites us to explore and know more about Him. The idea of knowing God, the I am who I am, is surrounded by mystery. It seems that we were not made to understand everything about Him, given that our capacity for understanding is limited. Despite His mysterious yet intimately close nature, Yahweh presents a paradox. His vastness and complexity are beyond our human understanding, but this does not discourage us from seeking a closer relationship with Him. Our daily journey should be the pursuit of a deeper knowledge of God, drawing near to the one who loves us unconditionally and pursues us relentlessly. This pursuit is valuable, as it leads us to a deeper understanding of perfect love and true fulfillment. Genesis 1 presents to us a personal God with emotions, thoughts, and His own will, which constitutes a personality. God is not just a distant entity, He is an infinitely complex and ordered personality. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as stated in 1 Corinthians 14:33. He is a God of order, and this is reflected in the way He created the universe, establishing the seas and the earth before the creatures that inhabit them, creating the sun before the plants, and establishing laws for man soon after his creation. Recognizing the order in His ways helps us better understand His nature when we reflect on the history of creation. We walk by faith, and God guides our paths. We can look back and recognize that if it weren't for God's presence by our side, we wouldn't be where we are today. Understanding that God is a God of order emerges as we deny that He can be associated with disorder. He is the God of peace, which implies a logical necessity and organization of elements, tasks, or people. When an environment is organized, it means it has been carefully arranged and everything is in its proper place. The universe created by God is a testament to His order. He organized the creation of everything in a systematic sequence over 6 days, establishing the world as we know it today. In Genesis 1:31, it is said that God saw everything He had made, and behold, it was very good, and thus He fully validated His creation. There was evening and there was morning, the 6th day. He created the sun, moon, and stars to regulate time and seasons, and these celestial bodies operate with precision and predictability, as described in Genesis 1:14-18. God appointed these sources of light in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, serving as signs of His providential care and to mark the seasons, days, and years. They also serve to illuminate the earth. God created the 2 great lights, the greater one, the sun, to rule the day, and the lesser one, the moon, to rule the night, along with the myriads of stars. He placed all these wonders in the heavens to provide light upon the earth, to rule the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. God saw that this was good and affirmed it. Another manifestation of God's order is the creation of time. God exists outside of time as we know it, but He created time so that the earth could record changes. Time is orderly, sequential, and independent of any human control. It helps us maintain order by providing everyone with the same number of hours per day, regardless of whether we are rich or poor, young or old. No matter what happens on earth, the sun will rise and set at the appointed hour. Since God is a God of order, we are called to reflect that order in our lives. We were created to think in an organized manner, to reason, judge, and consider all aspects of an issue. God invites us to seek and maintain this order, thus reflecting his own nature in our daily existence. God presents himself as Yahweh, symbolizing not only his unwavering faithfulness, but also his eternal and immutable nature. This is reflected in his invitation in Isaiah 1:18. Come now, let us reason together, demonstrating his delight in our communion with him, in our questions, and in the study of his word. God seeks to organize our chaotic thoughts, reinforcing that the more we resemble him, the more ordered our lives will be. The use of singular verbs in Genesis 1 underscores the uniqueness of God, while the term Elohim is plural, indicating a complexity in his nature that points to the doctrine of the Trinity. God is three in one. This simultaneous singularity and plurality are rich and fundamental theologically for understanding the divine complexity. God's goodness is evident throughout creation. He blesses and sustains all he has created, declaring that it is good. Scriptures show us a God who is life, capable of generating life. The dead cannot create life. God is active, works and rests, and gives directives, illustrating his continuous involvement in the realms of time and space. Communication is a central facet of God's nature. He not only speaks to the world he created, but also desires to connect specifically with people. He instructed humanity to be fruitful, to multiply, and to rule over the earth, showing that he desires us to actively participate in the administration of his creation. God created human beings in his own image, implying that there are aspects in which we are like him and he like us. This image reflects certain divine attributes such as creativity, rationality, and relational capacity. However, God is fundamentally different from us in many aspects, such as his ability to create ex nihilo, out of nothing, while we only transform what already exists. Therefore, studying the Bible not only helps us understand more about God, but also about how we should live, reflect his image, and fulfill the purposes for which we were created. Every discovery about God invites us to explore more deeply the vastness of his nature and to more fully participate in his redemptive work in the world. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to receive more messages like these. Until the next video, God bless you.